Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for tuning in to YouTube or from whatever outlet you're listening or watching us. Ahmed Fareed impressed me with the quick pickup of his knowledge of horse racing. He covers all kinds of sports for NBC. He's worked at Major League Baseball Network, and he also actually listens to this show. So that's all the pluses. That's how much I like the guy already. And Ahmed joins us now. Welcome into the show.
Thank you, Kenny. It's good. I'm a loyal listener to the podcast for sure.
Wow. And what was this year like? I mean, they kind of, I would say throw you into the fire, but you jump right into horse racing. You've covered every other sport out there, it seems, and now this year you cover the Triple Crown Trail and then go all the way through the Triple Crown, and just kind of your overall take on the horse racing world.
Yeah, so for the past 6 years or so, I've been out in the Bay Area, San Francisco, and was covering a bunch of different sports there, Warriors and 49ers and Raiders, and the last couple of years doing the San Francisco Giants pregame, postgame. But then moved the whole family out east to the national headquarters for NBC in Connecticut there. And for the first 3 months, they said, okay, we're going to stick you on a couple things that you might not be too familiar with. One of them is horse racing. And they go, how much do you know about horse racing? I go, very little. They go, perfect. You're perfect for the job. So they threw me in it. And the great thing is they've given me so much time to just dive into it and study it and talk to a lot of people. I've hung out with Randy Moss and Jerry Bailey extensively on the road to the Kentucky Derby with all the different preps that were out there, working on those shows. And so it's been hard. I'm not going to lie. I mean, obviously there are so many intricacies to the sport, and that doesn't just have to do with the horses, it's the trainers and the jockeys and the ownership groups, all with their separate stories. And I always tell people always ask me, they go, do you ever get nervous on TV? And I go, you know what? I never really sweat unless I am a little uncomfortable with the subject matter. And so, I apologize, Kenny. For the last 3 months, I've been sweating a little bit more on TV than I have the last couple of years, but the team's been great. You've been great to work with, and you guys have helped me so much. So I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate what I've gotten to know about the sport so far.
Well, I got to tell you, I never knew you were sweating. I mean, you pulled it off great. If you were like the duck in the water, right? If whatever you were doing underneath the water, it didn't show on the surface. You're just smoothly going along. One thing that I thought with horse racing and with the baseball that you've covered, I don't know if there's two more sports that have more stats. I know every sport's got a lot of stats, but baseball and horse racing, maybe that goes back to when they were the heyday sports back in the 30s, 40s, 50s. But there's a lot of stats to read on every race and every ball game out there.
I love that you brought that up, because that was one of the first things I thought about just from being a baseball guy, and I worked back in the day at MLB Network for a couple of years as well. That was one of the first things I realized is how much, we pour over the stats in both different sports. And you're oftentimes in baseball, you're working with small sample sizes. And that is the name of the game in horse racing, where you're trying to extrapolate as much knowledge as you can from as little information as you have. Sometimes it's just kind of the last race, which was not against good competition a month and a half ago or 3 months ago. And so that was one of the things I noticed right away, was just how similar they are into trying to pour over the numbers and trying to figure out what numbers matter and what numbers don't. I think that's been a real eye opener for me, is that I look at some of these and go, hey, this was a great race for the horse. He looked great. You know what? You didn't come out of it very good. There's a whole lot more to it than just the numbers, but still at the same time, for numbers people, I think there's a lot to offer there.
That's a great point. And I think sometimes there's too many. My favorite baseball stat now, I don't know, it's kind of like, in horse racing, and as you know, they talk a lot about the time of the race. There's an old trainer, Charlie Whittingham, the late, great trainer, Charlie Whittingham, won a couple of derbies and everything else along the way. He had, as only a tough ex-Marine like he was could say, he said, time only matters when you're behind bars. Did you win the race? That's really all I care about. And And I think that when it's this whole baseball stat, Ahmed, that fascinates me, how fast did it leave the park? It's a home run. I don't.
Right. Well, and I think there is a fine line between how much do we want to analyze it and how much do we want to make this a science and how much do we want to just appreciate the beauty of the sport?
Yeah.
How much do we just want to appreciate what is happening with great athletes, whether the baseball players, great athletes, whether they're horses and jockeys. And I think there is a conflict there, and I saw it with baseball the past few years is where you get into too many stats and numbers. You're taking the art and the joy of our sport away. Just enjoy it for what it is. This was a horse that, maybe doesn't have the best numbers and the buyer speed figure's not very high, but he's a winner and he's a champion and he digs deep. And there's something to be said about enjoying the sport at that level as well.
Did you enjoy going out in the mornings and walk around the barns? I mean, because it's kind of like its own separate world. It's a lot different than being around the batting cage before practice or watching a shoot around before basketball. It's kind of, I don't know how to describe it other than say I haven't been around, and I've been around this sport a lot, but I haven't been around it any other sport that has that kind of own little culture of the backside that horse racing has.
Yeah, and it's got its own pace in the morning. Yeah, when I first started and I went out to Gulfstream just to kind of scout it out with Rob Hyland, who is our producer for the Triple Crown, and with Jerry and with Randy, and they said, "You want to go out to the barns with us?" And I go, "Absolutely." I go, "What time you getting up?" And they go, "Well, we'll be at your door at 6 o'clock." And I go, "Well, on second thought, maybe I don't want to go that early." No, but we did, and I did every stop we went on in Baltimore. I did it in Louisville, and then this past one at Belmont, I got up and went to the barns. And you're right, there's just an interesting pace to the whole thing. And what struck me was how different every trainer was and how different they operated. Bill Mott, every time we saw him, he was on top of a horse riding around, obviously very involved. Todd Pletcher had his giant staff and a well put together office. It was just, they're all so different. Jason Service is different than the rest of them, Chad Brown, and they all have their different things that they do that leads them to success. And it's not a cookie cutter. It's real obvious when you go around, you take a look at all the barns and how they're all acting. And Dwayne Lucas was just sitting out, just talking to people, sitting out in his chair and just lounging around and taking it all in. So I thought that was really cool to see. It helped me learn who these people were first and foremost. I got to know them a little bit better. And so when I saw them, I had a little background, but just it struck me how different they approached the sport from each and every one of them.
That's an interesting observation. And that's why, as I said earlier when we first started the show, I said, we're talking with Ahmed Fareed of NBC Sports. And I said, I want to get Ahmed's opinion on it because for those of us that's been around it, as with any sport that you're around a lot of times, you forget things. You take things for granted. You don't forget them, but you take it for granted. And that's why I like to get a fresh perspective. And what you just said, I thought about it. I said, I don't know very few trainers that I could say are like the same guy. I can say that about a lot of coaches I've covered, basketball coaches, football coaches. They're kind of cut from the same cloth, a lot of them. And except for this love of horses that naturally you'd have to have, most of the approaches are very unique for all the trainers in this sport.
Yeah, and it was really obvious, like I said, walking around and seeing that, and just kind of watching how much they care for all the animals. I mean, it wasn't uncommon to see a couple of times we saw trainers, combing the horses and getting some of the dead hair off, and just kind of how they interact with them. They always wanted us to meet the horses. Kenny McPeak was like, "You want to meet him? You want to go over here? You want to meet the horse?" Yep. And so we would. We'd go and we'd meet the horse. And my gosh, Randy Moss. I mean, Jerry loves horses. Randy Moss really loves horses. He would be like, "All right, it's time to go. All right, Randy. Okay, cut it short. We're good here." But that is just what it is, and you feel it immediately when you're there in the barns. And so that's what's a little, disappointing to me. And I was an outsider. 4 months ago, and still in some respects, I'm still an outsider. But when you hear all this talk about how, if you don't see the sport, you don't understand how much these horses are cared for and how much they're loved. And you can see it every time I go to the barns, just because of what I just told you. They say, let's go talk to them. Let's go meet them. You want to see them? You want to go over it? Yeah, absolutely. We want to hang out with the horses as much as we want to talk to you about them.
And the thing is, when the trainer tricks you into going for the horse that likes to bite, they did that to me a lot when I first started. You want to pet him? Sure. It's kind of like, hey, you want to pet that dog? And he starts growling at you. Oh, wait, no, I don't want to pet him.
I am still I stand so far behind. I'm behind Randy and Jerry every time we go. And I just don't know where to stand sometimes, right side, left side. There's so much things like that. So I just try to as much as I can, I'm in Randy's hip pocket when we're out there.
That's a good place to be. I'm kind of the same way. And I do apologize. I was supposed to go out to you with one morning with you guys, and I slept in. I got up like 7:30 and went out,
You know, it's funny, and I was talking to Mike Tirico, who Mike's been a huge help to me because he was new to it just a couple of years ago as well. So he gave me a lot of tips that helped him learn and become familiar with all the terms. And he heard that I was going out to the barns. He goes, you know what? By the second year, you won't be doing that. You won't. He's like, you'll be sleeping in like the rest of us.
He'll be picking up the cell phone and calling the trainer like about 11:30 in the morning.
I know, exactly. But so far, I like it. As long as I can sleep, maybe the other day a little bit later, it's been a whole lot of fun for me.
As with any sport, and again, the many that Ahmed Fareed has covered in his career and is covering now for NBC. Again, like you say, there's a lot of times that we go into a sport knowing enough about it, but you can research it and you can meet the people. And even after you've covered a sport for a long time, you still research it and meet the people, don't you? I mean, there's some very basic reporting skills that are always going to be out there.
There's always more to learn, and the sport is changing. With baseball, it's changing before our eyes with the different general managers who are involved and how they approach different strategies of an opener. Your starting pitcher's not going 7 innings anymore. He might be going an inning in the third. So it's always changing, and that's obvious here with horse racing. But I've gone into it because I know that there's everyone I'm working with, you included, Donna, Randy, Jerry, have been involved in it pretty much, their whole lives. And so there's a depth of knowledge there that I will never have. So what I have to do every time is I go in here, I'm saying, you know what? I'm excited to cover the sport. I enjoy it, and I'm going to be curious about it. I'm not going to try to pretend I'm an expert out there next to Lafitte, who's been around it his whole life and knows so much. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be enthusiastic about talking about it, and I'm going to be curious about every different aspect of it. And I think every once in a while that does help, from the common fan standpoint, watching at home that might not be as familiar as you guys are with the sport. There are these questions that you think is obvious, but to me, it's not that obvious.
Right.
So we get it out there and get it out to a general audience.
And still the best question, even for those of us who've been around whatever the sport is, what happened? Why'd you do this? I mean, it's a pretty simple question. I like to hear what the guys actually doing it are doing it. What do they got to say? And that leads me back to baseball, Ahmed. What fascinates me these days is, like you mentioned about the starting pitchers, may not even get through an inning. And I just always kind of grin a little bit at when they're just going so excited about a pitcher that has a complete game. Maybe I'm too old school. I'm with the St. Louis Cardinals of the Bob Gibson, Lou Brock, Kurt Flood. That's my team. I've been a Cardinals fan. It always fascinates me, like all the attention given to a complete game, as if it had never happened before.
Right. Well, I think like last year, I believe in the National League, it was either 1 or 2 complete games led the league.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was. I don't think we've had a pitcher with 10 or more complete games since 2008. I think I was looking at it the other day. I'm with you. I miss it. I love complete games. I love no-hitters. You don't have a complete game, you can't have a no-hitter.
Right.
And that is a huge piece of baseball history and what baseball is that is going away. And I'm bummed to see it. Now, at the same time, I understand it.
Right.
You look at the numbers and you say, okay, if the pitcher third time through the order is getting beat up, and so we got to bring in a reliever. We're dumb not to. So I get that. I think it just creates another question of what is the sport of baseball that we want? Do we want a sport that the pitcher only pitches a few innings, or do we want a sport where they're incentivized to go longer? And at that point, are you changing the rules? Do you try to do things to make teams want to push their pitchers longer? Is there an incentive there for it? So I think, once again, like we were talking before, you look at horse racing over the last year, that horse racing is not a sport that has changed a whole lot. For good and bad, some of the medical practices we've seen throughout the years. And so I think it's always good to just take a step back and say, okay, is this the sport that we want? Is this the entertainment product that we want? And if it's not, we shouldn't be afraid to tweak some rules or change some things, even though inherently in this game, horse racing, baseball, it's not about change. It's about, this is the same thing we've been doing for tens of hundreds of years. But every once in a while, you got to be like, okay, what's the smart thing to do with the rules of the game?
And Ahmed Fareed is getting ready for the NBA draft. And, that's another thing. Yeah, I'm sounding like this guy sitting up in the balcony going, another thing that bothers me about the days. but the one and done.
Yeah.
I just am not a one and done fan for a lot of reasons. And one of them is the fact that I think that the NBA quality overall, while we are seeing some of the best, I don't know if we've ever seen better shooters on one team than obviously, Curry, Durant, and Thompson on the Warriors. I've never seen three guys that could shoot like that on one team. So we're seeing some spectacular things going on right now. I get all that. Harden scores, 60 points, his team loses, but he can score 60 points any night, it seems. But I think overall there's a lot of weakness in the NBA because these guys don't have that college experience. And I know there's exceptions that step in, but there's not that many LeBrons and Kobes that are just ready to pop out of high school and just breeze through college for a year and play in the NBA, in my opinion, other than like a Karl Anthony Towns or somebody like that. But then you look at the other 20 guys, 30 guys drafted and see what they're doing compared to those guys.
Right, I know, and I am. I'm preparing for. We got this Roto World with NBC, Roto World, and NBC teamed up. I got an NBA draft preview, so I'm looking at all the different one and dones, and I'm looking at next year, the top prospects for next year, and they're all high school seniors who are going to either play internationally for a year or come and play for a college for 1 year, and it's definitely good, I think, for the marketing standpoint. I don't know that there's a more famous player than Zion Williamson was this past year playing at Duke. He's probably more famous than, I don't know, 70% of the NBA players. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. So, as far as a marketing standpoint for some of the superstars, I do think it's probably good for them. But, yeah, you do wonder about some of these guys that slip through the cracks, and would they have gotten more, not necessarily better training, because it's hard to argue that they don't get good training on a G level team if they're playing pro basketball, the D League if they're playing all the time, but they might just not get the right attention or the attention they need, and they're a late bloomer, and maybe at that point the NBA team has moved on, where if you're a 4-year college player, the coach is not moving on because he's your guy and you're trying to win every single season with you. So there's definitely something to be said, good and bad with the current system, but for a few of those players, man, I think it has helped them.
Ahmed, you cover everything. Do you get a break now after the draft? Do the NBC give you some time off, I hope?
I do. I'm taking some vacation. I've got this NBA draft preview, and then I'm doing some rugby in the fall. We got the Rugby World Cup in the fall, so another sport that I'm trying to rack my brain and learn as quickly as possible. Did Premier League soccer in winter as well. So basically, it's like I'm in college again, Kenny. It's like I'm taking 4 credit hours of horse racing, 3 of soccer, and just trying to pass and move on to the next level.
The rugby game I saw, and I called for NBCSN a few years ago. I worked with David Gibson, the producer on it. Was at Soldier Field in Chicago. The U.S. played Australia. And
oh wow!
And I forgot somebody couldn't do it. They were and so they bring me in, and I was doing the research. You know how it is. You cram. I'm trying to get all this in, and then suddenly I realized that it's full scale. This is 15 man. This is like this is everybody. This isn't 7-on-7 because I'd watched we were doing some 7-on-7 at that time. I thought, hey, it's kind of a fun up and down sport. But it is different. It's a different. Rugby's the only sport though I don't understand still to this day is cricket. And I've tried to watch it, and I don't get cricket. I've been able to understand other sports, but I've never asked to cover cricket, nor will I ever be, I'm sure. But that's the one sport I still don't get. Everything else. And you know what's going
to happen, Kenny? NBC is going to get cricket, and you and I are going to be doing it, play-by-play and color analyst.
Well, if you're there with me, Ahmed, I'll do it. If they put us together, I'll be glad to do it.
Right.
We'll call Rob Hyland. He listens to this show. We'll tell Rob we'll do that. We're ready for the cricket.
He'll put it on the platter for us. It'll be no brainer.
Well, listen, I really enjoyed getting to meet and work with you, and I look forward again to doing it again on the horse racing scene or some other sports scene with NBC. Ahmed, I really appreciate the friendship we developed and for being on the show today.
Well, Kenny, like I said, you've been so welcoming. It's made me feel a lot better as an outsider, and hopefully, we can talk 10 years from now and say, wow, we've been doing this for a decade, a decade together, me with you. So that'd be great.
And if we're still doing this show by that time, we'll probably have T-shirts and visors.
I like that. I heard that on the podcast. I go, you're going to get a podcast visor, and I worked right up to you, and I said, I want one of those.
I know.
You have them made, I want one.
I was telling our guys here, I said, Ahmed may be the only person to listen to this today, but somebody did listen today and brought up the visor, see? So that was great. That made my day.
And I'll be honest with you, there's been very few things that have helped me more than listening to podcasts, yours and some other ones out there as well, because I feel like just hearing you talk about it for 30 minutes has been so valuable to me. And so I really have. I'm a listener. I'm a fan. I'm a listener.
All right. Well, thank you. And I'll be checking in on your NBA draft preview, by the way.
Yeah, it sounds good, Kenny.
All right. Ahmed Fareed of NBC Sports joining us. Some more thoughts when we come back here on the Horse Racing Show. Stay with us.